This is Korea News for March 7, 2022. As of midnight on the 6th, the number of new corona patients was 244,628, and the cumulative death toll was 1,013 over the past week. As the number of deaths due to omicron mutations is rapidly increasing, it is pointed out that it is necessary to focus on the management of high-risk groups. The Central Quarantine Countermeasures headquarters announced on the 6th that there were 244,628 new corona cases and 161 deaths. As of March 1, the number of confirmed cases has been around 200,000, and the number of patients with severe cases is also 885, drawing an upward curve. The cumulative number of confirmed cases was 4,456,264. Self-employed person A, who lives in Pyeongtaek, Gyeonggi Province, recently tested a self-diagnosis kit with his wife with symptoms suspected of corona, and the results were all positive. I went to nearby hospitals, clinics, and public health centers, but the line was too long, so I gave up the PCR test. On his way home, he stopped by a mart to buy daily necessities. Until now, PCR testing has not been considered. There are no obvious symptoms, and if the PCR test is positive, the burden of quarantine for 1 week and immediate livelihood can be disrupted. An increasing number of confirmed patients are avoiding PCR tests despite positive self-diagnosis kits. These are mainly self-employed people, daily workers, housewives, etc. who do not work, and the psychological burden of quarantine and maintenance of a livelihood are cited as reasons. It is pointed out that the impact of the government's reorganization of the quarantine and medical system centered on critically ill patients is not small. As tracking management, epidemiological investigations, and quarantine passes have all been suspended, daily life can be continued without PCR testing even if the self-diagnosis kit is positive in order to avoid the burdensome week of quarantine. The problem is that there are currently no sharp measures to control such confirmed cases. There is a high concern that the rate of increase in the number of confirmed cases of Omicron, which is highly contagious, will increase if they continue their daily lives such as face-to-face contact. On the 6th, Mr. A said, "If I get a PCR test and am isolated at home, there is no special treatment. I thought it would be a smarter choice to get treatment," he said. On the 4th, similar cases continued on an online community site, claiming that a delivery man continued to deliver without additional testing despite the positive result of the corona self-diagnosis kit. A British betting company predicted that the Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-in and the People's Strength presidential candidate Yoon Suk-yeol would win 33.33% and 76.34%, respectively. British betting company Smarket reported that the following figures were counted in the betting on the 20th Korean presidential election winner until 9 a.m. on the 6th. This is the reverse of the result of candidate Lee Jae-in with 74.63% in January, which was 40% higher than that of candidate Yoon Suk-yeol with 34.01%. Business Insider, an American economic media outlet, has reported that the betting results of this market have become a reality. The election of President Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential election in November 2016 was an unexpected result, and he pointed out that the number of bets on Trump by Smarket gamblers suddenly increased at the last minute. A similar trend was seen in the UK's Brexit withdrawal from the European Union in June of the same year. In relation to North Korea's recent missile launches, Yoon Suk-yeol, the presidential candidate for the People's Strength, has poured out his venom towards North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. At a rally in Gyeonggi, Gyeonggi, on the 6th, candidate Yoon said, "Even though North Korea fires missiles 9 times, the Moon Jae-in government has never said a provocation. Shooting," he said. Then, he raised his voice, saying, "If you leave the government to me, I will make even a brat like that come to my senses." In addition, at a rally held in front of the mayor of Gyeonggi in Gwangju, Gyeonggi Province on the 5th, candidate Yoon raised a flag for the Democratic Party's presidential candidate Lee Jae-in and criticized his views on security. On the same day, the Joint Chiefs of Staff announced that North Korea had launched a projectile presumed to be a ballistic missile into the East Sea. "I will never tolerate it." Candidate Yoon criticized candidate Jae-in Lee for not using the word provocation, and said, "Kim Jong-un and Yo Jong-kim say that the South hates using the word provocation. Aren't they strange people?" He continued, "The first purpose of the government is to protect the lives and safety of the people by receiving public taxes. If you can't say it's a provocation, why do you condemn it?" Regarding the controversy over election fraud, the National Election Commission said on the 6th that we apologize again for the confusion and inconvenience in relation to the controversy over the poor management of advance voting for those infected with corona and quarantined. In a notice distributed that night, the Election Commission said, "I feel responsible for not meeting the people's trust and expectations for stable election management." The Election Commission said, "We will prepare in detail so that the various problems raised this time do not recur on election day. We will announce it after it is confirmed at the meeting." Following the announcement of an apology this morning, the Election Commission issued an apology twice a day. It is interpreted that the ruling and opposition parties bowed their heads repeatedly as the aftermath became intense, such as criticizing with one voice. Earlier, the confusion that occurred during the preliminary voting process of corona-confirmed and quarantined people has spread to the controversy that it undermined the constitutional value. On the 5th, the Election Commission conducted advance voting by having confirmed patients vote at a separate temporary voting booth for quarantine purposes, and the election clerks received them and transferred them to the ballot box. There were criticisms of damaging the. At the polling center in Sinsa-Wondong, Yunpyeonggu, Seoul, there were protests after distributing voted ballots for Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-in. Has spread. In a statement on the same day, the Korean Bar Association also criticized. It expresses deep concern that the current state of disregard for the fundamental principles of democratic elections, such as direct and secret ballot, may seriously undermine the sovereign's suffrage and cause distrust. The National Election Commission will hold an emergency response meeting on the morning of the 7th to prepare countermeasures for the poor voting management of those who are confirmed or quarantined with COVID-19 that occurred during early voting. The Election Commission will hold an undisclosed countermeasure meeting at 10 a.m. on the same day at the Gyeonggi Government Complex in Gyeonggi, chaired by Roh Jong-hee, chairman of the left-wing plastic surgery department. The ruling and opposition lawmakers belonging to the National Assembly's Administrative Safety Committee convened an emergency issue report meeting with the Deputy Secretary General of the Election Commission at the National Assembly the day before and criticized the poor management of advance voting. He also ordered a plan to allow confirmed and quarantined persons to put their ballot papers directly into the ballot box. The Election Commission will prepare a countermeasure for this and report it to the Public Administration and Safety Committee. It is known that the Election Commission is strongly reviewing a plan to not set up a temporary voting booth for corona-confirmed and quarantined people, as in the case of advance voting, but to vote inside the polling station after general voters have finished voting. TBS Broadcasting's Kim Eo-jun's News Factory is subject to legal sanctions for violating the election broadcast deliberation regulations. The reason is that it violates the deliberation rules that prohibit people who have expressed support for a specific candidate from conducting current affairs programs during the official election campaign. The 20th Presidential Election Broadcasting Deliberation Committee decided to hear opinions on TBS Broadcasting, which entrusted broadcaster Kim Eo-jun, who expressed support for Lee Jae-in, the Democratic Party's presidential candidate, to broadcast during the official election campaign at a meeting on the 4th. Listening to opinions is a process of hearing the broadcaster's vocation ahead of legal sanctions such as program suspension, disciplinary action, warnings, and caution. An official from the Deliberation Committee said, "A majority of the opinions on legal sanctions have already been reached at the meeting, and after hearing opinions, the level of sanctions will be decided." Statutory sanctions correspond to severe penalties that act as a deductible factor in the review process for relicensing and reapproval of broadcasters. An employee of a subcontractor in his 20s who was working at Hyundai Steel's Yesan plant died after being hit by a steel structure. Another tragedy occurred 3 days after the death of a worker at the company's Dangjin works. According to the Ministry of Employment and Labor on the 6th, at 1:40 p.m. on the 5th at the Yesan factory of Hyundai Steel in Yesan-gun, Chungcheongnam-do, a 25-year-old man, A, was struck by a steel structure and died. It was identified that a mold weighing about 1 ton fell while repairing a mold for making automobile lower parts and attacked Mr. A, who was working under it. Person A belonged to a secondary subcontractor. When the 119 Fire Brigade arrived at the scene, it was reported that he was already in cardiac arrest. After the Ministry of Labor ordered the work to be stopped, the specific cause of the accident began to be determined. At the same time, it is investigating whether the Occupational Safety and Health Act and the Serious Accident Punishment Act have been violated. In Hyundai Steel, there was also a fatal accident on the 2nd. At the Dangjin works, a 57-year-old worker, B, fell into a large furnace that melted molten iron and died. At the workplace operated by Hyundai Steel, about 30 people have died in various accidents from 2007 to now. Thank you for watching today. Please like and subscribe.